Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. She has worked for Presidents Clinton, Bush 43, and Obama, served as ambassador to NATO and an advisor to Dick Cheney. And she has long been considered a rising star in the foreign policy arena. Then came Benghazi. Many questioned whether Victoria Nuland's ascent through the ranks of official Washington would be derailed by her role in the crafting of the now infamous talking points on the Benghazi attack. As Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen reports today, we got our first clue as to whether Victoria Nuland's star will continue to rise.
I was not in a policy role in this job. I was in a communications role.
Facing disjointed questioning from GOP senators on the Foreign Relations Committee, former State Department spokesperson Victoria Nuland, nominated to become an Assistant Secretary of State, defended her role in the crafting of the now infamous talking points on Benghazi.
At no point was I ever told to object to anything. I was acting on my instincts and asking for a higher level review to check them, and I did not make any edits, as I said.
In May, the Obama administration released 100 pages of emails in which officials at State, the White House, and CIA labored through 12 versions of the talking points that guided UN Ambassador Susan Rice through the Sunday shows of September 16th. That's when Rice pressed the false narrative that Benghazi was not a terrorist act, but a protest gone awry. In blunt terms, Nuland had pushed her colleagues to strike all references to the involvement of al-Qaeda-linked terrorists. These revisions don't resolve all my issues or those of my building leadership, Nuland wrote at one point. They are consulting with national security staff.
Can you just tell me who that building leadership was, who you're referring to there?
The only person that I consulted with that night was my regular reporting channel.
And that person is?
At the time, that was Jake Sullivan.
Now National Security Advisor to Vice President Biden, Sullivan at the time was Deputy Chief of Staff to then Secretary of State Clinton. Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky sought in vain for evidence to support the allegation that CIA personnel in Benghazi were covertly running weapons to the Syrian rebels.
There are many of us who believe that it had to do with an arms trade going out of the CIA annex, and that perhaps people were unhappy about arms being taken from one group to another and sent to another that may have incited the rioting and may have incited the terrorist attack.
Senator, I would be delighted to talk to you about the relationship between the State Department and the CIA in a separate setting, if that's helpful.
Nuland said she never discussed the Benghazi talking points with Secretary Clinton, but then Nuland admitted she did discuss with Clinton the need for the administration spokesman like herself to protect the quote-unquote equities of the CIA in their statements on Benghazi. That mirrored the language that Ben Rhodes of the White House staff used in the email that he sent to Nuland, Brett, during their exchanges on the talking points.
More on this with the panel. James, thank you. We have been detailing the various speed bumps for the president's health care law the past few days and weeks. So what are all the delays and problems really costing you? White House correspondent Wendell Goler looks for answers tonight.
Obamacare critics are complaining the year-long delay in the requirement that businesses with more than 50 workers provide insurance will wind up costing the government money because those companies that don't provide insurance next year won't have to pay a penalty for it.
Well, the Congressional Budget Office has previously said that the employer mandate would raise $10 billion in revenue in 2014. That money is obviously gone by the wayside.
Republican congressional leaders have asked the CBO if the delay in the employer mandate will raise the cost of the Affordable Care Act, but the CBO hasn't said yet. Supporters say in the long term, Obamacare will save money.
This transition policy does not change the fact that the Affordable Care Act will reduce the deficit by over $100 billion over the next 10 years. This is more than fully paid for.
At the White House, officials say the claim that the delay raises the cost of the law is part of a sabotage effort.
The House Republicans who are driving this narrative are not concerned about a delay in the implementation of a law that they oppose. They want to kill the bill.
Jay Carney says if Republicans wanted to fix parts of Obamacare, they'd offer alternatives. Senator John Thune says what's driving the effort to repeal the law is that so many parts aren't working.
And the House is going to vote this week on delaying the individual mandate for a year. I support that. We're talking about permanent delay. We'd like to see the thing delayed completely for everybody.
Other lawmakers disagree with Thune, but it's hard to argue there is no confusion even about how the administration is buying time.
The point is that the mandate was not delayed. Certain reporting by businesses that could be perceived as onerous, that reporting requirement was delayed.
A Treasury Department blog posting makes clear the mandate is being delayed. It contains no warning about not insuring workers, instead saying, quote, during this 2014 transition period, we strongly encourage employers to maintain or expand health coverage. All but about 6% of the companies covered by the insurance mandate already provide insurance for their workers, but part of the reason for the delay is finding a way to determine whether the insurance they provide meets the standards of the Affordable Care Act. Brett?
Wendell Goller live on the North Lawn. Wendell, thank you. A federal appeals court in Virginia has rejected a Christian school's bid to overturn Obamacare. Liberty University claimed the law violates its religious beliefs. Liberty's lead attorney tells Fox News the school will appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. House Speaker John Boehner says the vast majority of his GOP colleagues believe they need to deal with immigration reform, but he says they will do it in parts, starting with border security, not in the sweeping form of the Senate bill. Well, here's some reaction from the Senate.
Our message to our colleagues in the House is we are ready to negotiate, we are ready to talk, we are ready to sit down with you and negotiate and bring this issue to a conclusion that we all agree has to be addressed.
To say that this is just like the president's health care bill, nothing could be further from the truth. This is just what America wants us to do, work together in a bipartisan way to move forward.
The judge in the George Zimmerman murder trial will allow jurors to consider convicting him of the lesser charge of manslaughter. This is a huge setback for the defense and a major break for a prosecution that many feel has failed to prove its murder case. Correspondent Phil Keating has closing arguments from Sanford, Florida.
Why does this defendant get out of the car if he thinks that Trayvon Martin is a threat to him? Why? Why? Because he's got a gun. He's got the equalizer. He's going to take care of it. He's a wannabe cop.
15 months to the day when George Zimmerman was charged with second-degree murder for shooting and killing 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, the state delivered its closing argument, urging the jury to convict the neighborhood watch leader.
This defendant made the wrong assumption. He profiled him as a criminal. He assumed certain things, that Trayvon Martin was up to no good.
The day began with a major setback for Zimmerman. The judge will allow the jury to consider not only convicting him of second-degree murder, but also manslaughter, which could still send Zimmerman to prison for years. In February of last year, Martin bought Skittles and a fruit drink at a 7-Eleven and then walked to his dad's girlfriend's home. Within an hour, he was dead. Zimmerman, in his police reenactment, explained Martin attacked him and beat him into the walkway, forcing him to shoot in self-defense.
This is outrageous.
Zimmerman's attorney exploded this morning as prosecutors also tried to get this jury to consider the lesser charge of felony third-degree murder, arguing Martin's age qualified for child abuse.
Just when I thought this case couldn't get any more bizarre, the state is seeking third-degree murder based on child abuse? Is the court going to give this any serious contention or consideration?
And now it's the defense's turn. At 8:30 tomorrow morning, Zimmerman lead attorney Mark O'Mara will give his closing arguments. Expect those to be about 3 hours longer and far different than the version of events that you heard today. After that, a short state rebuttal by the prosecutors, and then sometime Friday afternoon, this jury will begin its deliberations. Brett?
Phil Keating live in Sanford, Florida. Phil, thank you. A conservative watchdog group, meantime, is accusing the Justice Department of helping to manage the pressure campaign that led to the charges against Zimmerman. A little-known agency called the Community Relations Service is supposed to be a peacemaker for local conflicts over race. Judicial Watch says its workers crossed the line, advocating against Zimmerman. A Justice Department official says the unit was simply trying to reduce tensions. Meanwhile, the former police chief in Sanford, Florida, told CNN last night he was fired because he did not want to arrest Zimmerman. Pro-life advocates in Maryland are up in arms about a local abortion provider, and they want authorities to take action. Correspondent Doug McElway tells us why tonight.
This video, taken by pro-life protesters Tuesday, purports to show a patient of late-term abortion provider Dr. Leroy Carhart being wheeled out of his clinic in Germantown, Maryland, to an awaiting ambulance. Carhart, allegedly by her side in the purple shirt. Fox News has been unable to independently verify its authenticity. Carhart is already under investigation by several Maryland agencies after the February death of a late-term abortion patient. A pro-life group gathered outside his Maryland clinic today, which was closed.
Maryland, do your job. Protect the women of your state. Immediately suspend Leroy Carhart's license.
Carhart, one of the few doctors who perform late-term abortions, is a lightning rod for controversy, as this undercover tape is said to show.
So I'll have a dead baby in me?
For 3 days, yeah.
Will it start to decay or something?
So it's like putting meat in a crock pot.
Once the proprietor of an emergency clinic in Nebraska, he vowed in 1991 to become a full-time abortionist after arsonists allegedly set fire to his home and barn, killing 17 horses. The focus on his Maryland clinic comes as 28 states scurry to impose tough new oversight on abortion clinics in the aftermath of the murder conviction of Dr. Kermit Gosnell, who ran a Philadelphia clinic described as a house of horrors. No debate is more heated than in Texas, where a final vote is set for tomorrow on a bill that would ban most abortions after 20 weeks and require clinics to meet higher standards of care, a condition pro-life supporters say will save lives, but pro-choice advocates say will increase costs and ultimately risk.
And for the poor, you just happen to be up a creek without a pedal, and you can go to the back alleys where the coat hanger is used.
Despite the clamor from pro-life activists in Maryland for greater regulation, that state already strengthened oversight in 2010 after a woman had her bowels and uterus pierced during a late-term abortion. Maryland now requires a plan for fast transfer of patients to a hospital in an emergency, something both sides in this debate agree upon. Brett?
Doug, thank you. Taking your money away from you so someone can pretend to be a cow. Really? That's later in the Grapevine.